Good morning, good morning, good morning. This is Thursday, July the 18th, would you believe? And we're still reading from the book Celestine Prophecy by James Whitfield. And without further ado, we'll start reading from where we left off. I'll take a quick sip of water here. Okay. I don't know. How do you know it will happen? I asked, suddenly feeling skeptical. Even after all the mysterious coincidences that had happened to me since I had been in Peru, I still had trouble believing one would occur now just because we wanted it to. Don't forget the third insight, Julia replied. Universe is energy, energy that responds to our expectations. People are part of that energy universe too. So when we have a question, the people show up who have the answer. She cut her eyes to the other people in the room. I don't know who these people are, but if we could talk with them long enough, we would find a truth each had for us, some part of the answer to our questions. I looked at her, a sense. She leaned toward me across the table. Get it into your head. Everyone who crosses our path has a message for us. Otherwise, they wouldn't have taken another path or left earlier or later. The fact that these people are here means that they are here for some reason. I looked at her and she said, is figuring out who to take time to talk with when talking with everyone is impossible. How do you decide? I asked. Manuscript says there are signs. I was listening intently to Julia, but for some reason I glanced around and looked at the man to my right. He turned around exactly the same time and looked back at me. As I caught his eye, he shifted his gaze back to his food. I also looked away. What signs? I asked. Signs like that, she said. Like what? Like what you just did. She nodded toward the man to my right. What do you mean? Julia leaned toward me again. The manuscript says we will learn that sudden, spontaneous eye contact is a sign that two people should talk. But doesn't that happen all the time? I asked. Yes, it does, she said. And after it happens, most people just forget about it and go on with what they are doing. I nodded. What other signs does the manuscript mention? I asked. A sense of recognition, she replied. Seeing someone who looks familiar, even though you know you've never seen the person before. When she said that, I thought of Dobson and Renee, of how familiar they looked when I had first seen them. Does the manuscript say anything about why people look familiar? I asked. Not much. It just says we are members of the same thought group with certain other people. Thought groups are usually evolving along the same lines of interest. They think the same, and that creates the same impression and outward experience. We intuitively recognize members of our thought group, and very often they provide messages for us. I looked at the man to my right one more time. He did look vaguely familiar. Incredibly, as I gazed at him, he turned and glanced at me again. I quickly looked back at Julia. You must talk with this man, Julia said. I didn't respond. I felt uncomfortable with the idea of just walking up to him. I wanted to leave to go to Equidios. I was about to make that suggestion when Julia spoke again. This is where we need to be, she said, not in Equidios. We have to play this out. The trouble with you is that you're resisting the idea of walking up to him and starting a conversation. How did you know that? I asked. Do what? She replied. No, what I was thinking. There is nothing mysterious about it. It's a matter of looking closely at your expressions. What do you mean? When you are appreciating someone at a deeper level, you can see their most honest self beyond any fads they may put up. When you really focus on this level, you can perceive what someone is thinking as a stubble expression on their face. This is perfectly natural. It sounds telepathic to me, I said. She grinned. Telepathy is perfectly natural. Glanced over at the man again. He did not look. He had better get your energy together and talk with him, Julia said, before you lose the opportunity. I focused on increasing my energy until I felt stronger, then asked, what am I going to say to this guy? The truth, she said, but the truth in a form you think he would recognize. Okay, I will. I slid back my chair and walked over to where the man was sitting. He looked shy and nervous, the way I remembered Pablo looking the night I met him. I tried to look beyond the man's nervousness to a deeper level. When I did, I seemed to perceive a new look on his face, one with more energy. Hello, I said. You appear not to be a native Peruvian. I'm hoping you can help me. I'm looking for a friend of mine, Will James. Please sit down, he said in a Scandinavian accent. I'm Professor Edmund Corner. He offered me his hand and said, I'm sorry, I do not know your friend Will. I introduced myself and then explained, just on a hunch, that it would mean something to him, that Will was searching for the ninth insight. I'm familiar with the manuscript, he said. I'm here to study its authenticity. Alone? I was to meet a Professor Dobson here, but so far he has not come. I don't understand the delay. He assured me that he would be here when I arrived. You know Dobson? Yes, he is the one who is organizing an inspection of the manuscript, and he's all right. He's coming here. The professor looked at me questionably. Those were the plans we made. Has something been wrong? My energy fell. I realized that Dobson's meeting with Connor had been set up before Dobson's arrest. I met him on the airplane, I explained, when I came to Peru. He was arrested in Lima. I have no idea what happened to him. Arrested? My God. When did you last speak with him? I asked. Several weeks ago, but our meeting time here was firm. He said he would call me if anything changed. Do you remember why he wanted you to meet him here instead of in Lima? I asked. He said there was some ruins around here and that he would be up in this area speaking with another scientist. Did he mention where he would be talking to this scientist? Yes, he said he had to go to San Luis, I believe. Why? I don't know. I was just wondering, as I said this, two things happened simultaneously. First, I began thinking of Dobson, of seeing him again. We were meeting along a road with large trees, and then at the same time, I looked out the window and saw, to my amazement, Father Sanchez walking up the porch steps. He looked tired and his clothes were dirty. In the parking lot, another priest waited in an older car. Who is that? Professor Connor asked. It's Father Sanchez, I replied, barely able to contain my excitement. I turned around and looked for Julia, but she was no longer sitting at the table. I got up just as Sanchez walked into the room. When he saw me, he stopped abruptly. I looked a look of total surprise on his face. Then he walked over and embraced me. Are you all right? He asked. Yes, fine, I said. What are you doing here? Through his fatigue, he chuckled lightly. I didn't know where else to go. And I almost didn't make it here. Hundreds of troops are headed this way. Why are the troops coming? Connor asked from behind me, walking up to where Sanchez and I were standing. I'm sorry, Sanchez replied. I do not know what the troops have in mind. I just know there are many. I introduced the two men and told Father Sanchez of Connor's situation. Connor appeared panicked. I must leave, he said, but I have no driver. Father Paul is waiting outside, Sanchez said. He is going back to Lima immediately. You may ride with him if you wish. Indeed I do, Connor said. Wait, what if they run into those troops? I asked. I don't think they would stop Father Paul, Sanchez said. He is not well known. At that moment, Julia came back into the room and I saw Sanchez. The two hugged warmly, and again I introduced Connor. As I spoke, Connor seemed to grow even more fearful, and after only a few minutes, Sanchez told him that it was time for Father Paul to start back. Connor left to get his belongings from his room and quickly returned. Both Sanchez and Julia escorted him outside, but I told him goodbye there and waited at the table. I wanted to think. I knew meeting Connor was significant somehow and that Sanchez finding us here was important, but I couldn't quite figure it out. Before long, Julia came back into the room and sat down beside me. I told you something was going to happen here, she said. If we hadn't stopped, we wouldn't have seen Sanchez or Connor for that matter. By the way, what did you learn from Connor? I'm not sure yet, I said. Where is Father Sanchez? He checked into a room to rest for a while. He hadn't slept in 2 days. I looked away. I knew that Sanchez was tired, but hearing that he was unavailable disappointed me. I wanted very much to talk with him to see if he could add some perspective to what was happening, especially concerning the soldiers. I felt uneasy and part of me wanted to flee with Connor. Julia picked up on my impatience. Take it easy, she said. Slow down and tell me what you think of the 8 insights so far. I looked at her and tried to center myself. I'm not sure where to start. What do you think the 8th insight is saying? I thought back. It's about a very way of relating to other people, to children and to adults. It's about naming control dramas and breaking through them and focusing on other people in a way that sends them energy. And she asked. I focused on her face and immediately saw that she was getting at, and if we are observant about who to talk with, then we get the answers we desire as a result. Julia smiled broadly. Have I grasped the insight? I asked. Almost, she said, but there's one more thing. You understand how one person can uplift another. Now you're about to see what happens in a group where all the participants know how to interact this way. I walked out to the porch and sat in one of the wrought iron chairs. After a few minutes, Julie came through the door and joined me. We had eaten leisurely dinner without much talking, and afterward had decided to sit outside in the night air. 3 hours had gone by since Sanchez had gone to his room, and I was beginning to feel impatient again. When Sanchez suddenly walked outside and sat down with us, I was relieved. Have you heard anything about Will? I asked. When I spoke, he slid his chair around to face Julia and me. I noticed that he was carefully adjusting the position of his chair so that he was an equal distance from each of us. Yes, he said finally, I have. He paused again and appeared to be in thought, so I asked, what did you hear? Let me tell you everything that happened, he said. When Father Carl and I left to go back to my mission, we expected to find Father Sebastian there, along with the military. We expected an inquisition. When we arrived, we found that Father Sebastian and the soldiers had left abruptly several hours earlier after receiving a message. For a while, for a whole day, we didn't know what was going on. Then, yesterday, we were visited by Father Costos, whom I understand you have met. He told us that he was directed to my mission by Will James. Apparently, Will remembered the name of my mission from his conversation earlier with Father Carl, and intuitively knew that we would need the information Father Costos was bringing. Father Costos had decided to support the manuscript. Why did Sebastian leave so suddenly? I asked. Because, Sanchez said, he wanted to speed up the implementation of his plans. The message he received told him that Father Costos was about to expose his intentions to destroy the ninth insight. Sebastian found it. Not yet, but he expects to. They found another document that indicated where the ninth is. Where is it supposed to be? Julia asked. At the Celestine ruins, Sanchez replied. Where's that? I inquired. Julia looked at me. About 60 miles from here. It's a dig the Peruvian scientists have excavated exclusively with quite a lot of secrecy. It consists of several layers of ancient temples. First, Mayan, then Inca. Apparently, both cultures believed there was something special about that location. I suddenly realized that Sanchez was concentrating on the conversation with unusual intensity. When I talked, he would focus totally on me, without breaking his gaze at all. When Julia spoke, Father Sanchez shifted his position to focus completely on her. He seemed to be acting very deliberately. I wondered what he was doing, and at that precise moment there occurred a lull in the conversation. They both looked at me expectantly. What? I asked. Sanchez smiled. It's your time to speak. Are we taking turns? I asked. No, Julia said. We are having a conscious conversation. Each person speaks when the energy moves to him. We could tell it had moved to you. I didn't know what to say. Sanchez looked at me warmly. Part of the eighth insight is learning to interact consciously when in a group. But don't get self-conscious. Just understand the process. As the members of a group talk, only one will have the most powerful idea at any one point in time. If they are alert, the others in the group can feel who is about to speak, and then they can consciously focus their energy on this person, helping to bring out his idea with the greatest clarity. Then, as the conversation proceeds, someone else will have the most powerful idea than someone else, and so forth. If you concentrate on what is being said, you can feel when it is your turn. The idea will come up into your mind. Sanchez shifted his eyes to Julia, who asked, what idea were you having that you didn't express? I tried to think. I was wondering. I said finally, why Father Sanchez was looking intensely at whomever was speaking. I guess I was wondering what it meant. The key to this process, Sanchez said, is to speak up when it is your moment and to project energy when it is someone else's time. Many things can go wrong, Julia injected. Some people get inflated when in a group. They feel the power of an idea and express it. Then because that burst of energy feels so good, they keep on talking long after the energy should have shifted to someone else. They try to monopolize the group. Others are pulling back, and even when they feel the power of an idea, they won't risk saying it. When this happens, the group fragments and the members don't get the benefits of all the messages. The same thing happens when some members of the group are not accepted by some of the others. The rejected individuals are prevented from receiving the energy, and so the group misses the benefit of their ideas. Julia paused, and we both looked at Sanchez, who was taking a breath to speak. How people are excluded is important, he said. When we dislike someone or feel threatened by someone, the natural tendency is to focus on something we dislike about the person, something that irritates us. Unfortunately, when we do this, instead of seeing the deeper beauty of the person and giving them energy, we take energy away and actually do them harm. All they know is that they suddenly feel less beautiful and less confident, and it is because we sapped their energy. That is why, Julia said, this process is so important. Humans are aging each other at a tremendous rate out there with their violent competition. But remember, Sanchez added, in a truly functional group, the idea is to do the opposite of this. The idea is for every member's energy and vibration to increase because of the energy sent by all of the others. When this occurs, everyone's individual energy field merges with everyone else's and makes one pool of energy. It is as if the group is just one body, but with one many heads. Sometimes one head speaks for the body, sometimes another talks. But in a group functioning this way, each individual knows when to speak and what to say because he truly sees life more clearly. This is the higher person the eighth insight talked about in connection with a romantic relationship between a man and a woman, but other groups can form one as well. Father Sanchez's word made me think of Father Costos suddenly, and of Pablo. Had this young Indian family changed Father Costos' mind, leading him to now want to preserve the manuscript? Was Pablo able to do this because of the power of the eighth insight? Where is Father Costos now? I asked. Both individuals looked mildly surprised at my question, but Father Sanchez quickly replied. He and Father Carl decided to go to Lima to speak with our church leaders about what Cardinal Sebastian seems to have planned. I guess that's why he was so adamant about going to your mission with you. He knew there was something else he was supposed to do. Exactly, Sanchez said. A lure developed in the conversation, and we looked at one another, each of us waiting for the next idea. Question now, Father Sanchez finally said, is what are we supposed to do? Julia spoke first. I've had thoughts all along about being involved with the ninth insight somehow, of getting a hold of it long enough to do something, but I can't quite see it clearly. Sanchez and I gazed at her intensely. I see this happening at a particular place, she continued. Wait a minute, the place I've been thinking about is the ruins at the Celestine ruins. There is a particular spot there between the temples. I'd almost forgotten. She looked back at us. That's where I need to go. I need to go to the Celestine ruins. As Julia finished, both she and Sanchez shifted their gaze to me. I don't know, I said. I've been interested in why Sebastian and his people are so against the manuscript. I found out it's because they fear the idea of our inner evolution. But now I don't know where to go. Those soldiers are coming. It appears that Sebastian is going to find the ninth insight first. I don't know. I've been thinking. I'm involved somehow in convincing him not to destroy it. I stopped speaking. My thoughts went to Dobson again and then abruptly to the ninth insight. I suddenly realized that the ninth insight was going to reveal where we humans were going with this evolution. I wondered how humans would be acting toward each other as a result of the manuscript. And that question had been answered with the eighth insight. And now the logical next question was, where is it all going to lead? How will human society change? That had to be what the ninth was about. I knew somehow that this knowledge could also be used to ease Sebastian's fears about conscious evolution, if he would listen. I still think Cardinal Sebastian can be convinced to support the manuscript, I said with conviction. You see yourself convincing him? Sanchez asked me. No, not really. I'm with someone else who can reach him, someone who knows him and can speak at his level. As I said that, Julia and I both spontaneously looked at Father Sanchez. He struggled to smile and spoke with resignation. Cardinal Sebastian and I have avoided a confrontation over the manuscript for a long time. He's always been my superior. He considered me his prodigy, and I must admit that I looked up to him. But I guess I always knew that it would come to this. The first time you mentioned it, I knew that the task of convincing him was mine. My whole life has set me up for it. He looked intensely at Julie and me, then continued. My mother was a Christian reformer. She hated the use of guilt and cohesion when evangelizing. She felt that the people should come to religion because of love, not out of fear. My father, on the other hand, was a disciplinarian who later became a priest like Sebastian, believed adamantly in tradition and authority. That left me wanting to work within church authority, but always seeking ways it should be amended so that higher religious experience is emphasized. Dealing with Sebastian is the next step for me. I've been resisting it, but I know I have to go to Sebastian's mission at Equidius. I'll ride with you, I said. And that is the beginning now of chapter 9. And excuse me temporarily here. It seems like when I read, my sinus drive me crazy. The next chapter, the emerging culture. The road north wound through dense jungle and across several large streams. Tributaries, Father Sanchez told me, of the Amazon. We had risen early and said a quiet goodbye to Julia, then left in a vehicle Father Sanchez had borrowed, a truck with raised, oversized tires and four-wheel drive. As we traveled, the terrain rose slightly and the trees became more widely spaced and larger. She looked at the land around Valencia, I told Sanchez. He smiled at me and said, "We've entered a 50-mile stretch of land about 20 miles wide that is different, more energizing. It runs all the way to the Celestine ruins. On all sides of this area is pure jungle. Far to the right, at the edge of the jungle, I noticed a patch of cleared land. What is that?" I asked, pointing. "That," he said, "is the government's idea of agricultural development. A wide stretch of trees had been bulldozed and pushed into piles, some partially burned. A herd of cattle grazed aimlessly amid the wild grasses and eroded topsoil. As we passed, several looked our way, distracted by the sound. I noticed another patch of freshly bulldozed land and realized that the development was moving toward the larger trees we were traveling through. "That looks awful," I said. "It is," Sanchez replied. "Even Cardinal Sebastian is against it." I thought of Bill. Maybe this was the place he was trying to protect. What had happened to him? Suddenly, I thought of Dobson again. Connor had said Dobson intended to come to the inn. Why had Connor been there to tell me that? Where was Dobson now? Deported? Imprisoned? It did not escape my notice that I had spontaneously perceived an image of Dobson in connection with Bill. "How far away is Sebastian's mission?" I asked. "About an hour," Sanchez replied. "How are you feeling?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, how is your energy level?" "I think it's high," I said. "Lots of beauty here." "What did you think of the talk we three had last night?" he asked. "I thought it was amazing." "Did you understand what was happening?" "You mean the way ideas were bubbling up in each of us at different times?" "Yes, but the greater meaning of that?" "I don't know." "Well, I've been thinking about it, the way of consciously relating in which everyone attempts to bring out the best in others rather than to have power over them. In a posture the entire human race will eventually adopt. Think of how everyone's energy level and pace of evolution will increase at that point. Right, I said. I've been wondering how human culture will change as the overall energy level rises. He looked at me as if I had hit on the exact question. That's what I want to know too, he said. We looked at each other for an instant, and I knew we were both waiting to see who would have the next idea. Finally, he said, the answer to that question must be in the ninth insight. It must explain what will happen as the culture evolves forward. That's what I think, I said. Sanchez slowed the truck. We were approaching a crossroads and be seen undecided about which route to take. Do we go anywhere near San Luis? I asked. San Luis. He looked directly into my eyes only if we turn left at this intersection. Why? Connor told me Dobson had been planning to come through San Luis on his way to the inn. I think it was a message. We continued to look at each other. You were already slowing down at the crossroads, I said. Why? He shrugged. I don't know. The most direct route to Inquidius is straight ahead. I just felt hesitant for some reason. A chill shot through my body. Sanchez raised his eyebrow and I grinned. I guess we had better go through San Luis, huh? I nodded and felt a rush of energy. I knew that stopping at the inn and making contact with Connor was taking on more meaning. As Sanchez turned left and proceeded towards San Luis, I watched the roadside expectantly. 30 or 40 minutes passed and nothing happened. The road through San Luis and still nothing of note occurred. Then suddenly a horn blew and we turned to see a silver Jeep roaring up behind us. The driver was frantically waving. He looked familiar. That's Phil, I said. We pulled to the side of the road and Phil jumped out and ran to my side of the truck, grabbed my hand and nodded at Sanchez. I don't know what you're doing here, he said, but the road ahead is full of soldiers. You'd better come back and wait with us. How did you know we were coming, I asked. I didn't, he said. I just looked up and saw you pass by. We're about a half a mile back. He looked around for a second, then added, we better get off this road. We'll follow you, Father Sanchez said. We followed as Phil turned his Jeep around and headed back the way we'd come. He turned east onto another road and quickly parked. From behind a group of trees, another man walked out to greet the vehicle, and I couldn't believe my sight. It was Dobson. I climbed out of the truck and walked toward him. He was equally surprised and hugged me warmly. It's great to see you, he said. Same here, I replied. I thought you were shot. Dobson patted my back and said, nope, I guess I panicked. They simply detained me. Later, some officials sympathetic to the manuscript let me go, and I've been running ever since. He paused, smiling at me. I'm glad you're all right. When Phil told me he had met you at Valencia, I then was arrested with you later. I didn't know what to think, but I should have known we would run into each other again. Where are you headed? To see Cardinal Sebastian. We think he intends to destroy the last insight. Dobson nodded and was about to say something, but Father Sanchez walked up. I quickly introduced them. I think I heard your name mentioned in Lima, Dobson said to Sanchez, in connection with a couple of priests that were being detained. Father Caro and Father Costos, I asked. I think those were their names, yes. Sanchez only shook his head slightly. I watched him for a moment, then Dobson and I spent several minutes describing our experiences since being separated. He told me he had studied all 8 insights and seemed anxious to say something else. But I interrupted to tell him that we had met Connor and that he had returned to Lima. He'll probably be detained himself, Dobson said. I regret I couldn't get to the inn in time, but I wanted you to come to San Luis first to see another scientist. As it turned out, I couldn't find him, but I did run into Phil. And what is it? Sanchez asked. Maybe we ought to sit down, Dobson said. You won't believe this. Phil found a copy of part of the ninth insight. No one moved. He found a translated copy, Father Sanchez asked. Yes. Phil had been doing something inside his vehicle and was now walking toward us. You found part of the ninth? I asked him. I didn't find it, really, he said. It was given to me after you and I were captured. I was taken to another town, I don't know where. After a while, Cardinal Sebastian showed up. He kept probing me about the work at Valencia and my efforts to save the forest. I didn't know why until a guard brought me a partial copy of the ninth insight. The guard had stolen it from some of Sebastian's people, who had apparently just translated it. It talks about the energy of old forest. What did I say? I asked Phil. He paused, thinking. So Dobson asked again that we sit down. He led us to a spot where a tarpaulin was laid out in the center of a particular clearing. The place was beautiful. A dozen large trees formed a circle about 30 feet in diameter. Within the circle were highly fragmented tropical bushes and long-stemmed ferns of the brightest green I'd ever seen. We sat facing each other. Bill looked at Dobson, then Dobson looked at Sanchez and me and said, the ninth insight explains how human culture will change in the next millennium as a result of conscious evolution. It describes a significant different way of life. For instance, the manuscript predicts that we humans will voluntarily decrease our population so that we all may live in the most powerful and beautiful place on earth. But remarkably, many more of these areas will exist in the future because we will intentionally let the forests go uncut so that they can mature and build energy. According to the ninth insight, by the middle of the next millennium, he continued, humans will typically live among 500-year-old trees and carefully tended gardens. Yet, within easy travel distance of an urban area of incredible technological wizardry. By then, the means of survival, foodstuff and clothing and transportation will all be totally automated and at everyone's disposal. Our needs will be completely met without the exchange of any currency, yet also without any overindulgence of laziness. Guided by their intuitions, everyone will know precisely what to do and when to do it, and this will fit harmoniously with the actions of others. No one will consume excessively because we will have let go of the need to possess and to control for security. In the next millennium, life will have become about something else. According to the manuscript, he went on, our sense of purpose will be satisfied by the thrill of our own evolution, by the elation of receiving intuitions and then watching closely as our destinies unfold. The ninth depicts a human world where everyone has slowed down and become more alert, even vigilant for the next meaningful encounter that comes along. We will know that it could occur anywhere on a path that winds through a forest, for instance, or on a bridge that transvails some canyon. Can you visualize human encounters that have this much meaning and significance? Think how it would be for two people meeting for the first time. Each will observe the other's energy field, exposing any manipulation. Once clear, they will consciously share life stories until elatedly messages are discovered. Afterward, each will go forward again on their individual journey, but they will be significantly altered. They will vibrate at a new level and will therefore touch others in a way not possible before their meeting. As we gave him energy, Dobson became even more eloquent and inspired with his description of the new human culture. And what he said ranged true. I personally had no doubt that he was describing an achievable future. Yet I also knew that throughout history many visionaries had glimpsed such a world. Max, for example. Yet no way had been found to create such an utopia. Communism had become a tragedy. Even with the knowledge impaired in the first 8 insights, I couldn't imagine how the human race could go to the place described by the ninth, considering human behavior generally. When Dobson paused, I voiced my concern. The manuscript says our natural pursuit of the truth will lead us there, Dobson explained, smiling directly at me. But to grasp how this movement will occur, perhaps it is necessary to visualize the next millennium in the same manner you studied the current one. With me on the airplane, remember, as though you were living through it one more lifetime? Dobson briefly informed the other men of the process and then continued. Think about what occurred already in this millennium. During the Middle Ages, we lived in a simple world of good and evil, defined by the churchmen. But during the Renaissance, we broke free. We knew there had to be more to man's situation in the universe than the churchmen knew, and we wanted the full story. We then sent scientists out to discover our true situation, but when this effort didn't provide the answers we needed right away, we decided to settle in and turned our modern work ethic into a preoccupation that scrutinized reality and squeezed the mystery out of the world. But now we can see the truth of that preoccupation. We can see the real reason we spent 5 centuries creating material supports for human life was to set the stage for something else, a way of life that returns the mystery to existence. That is what the information now returning from the scientific method indicates. Mankind is on this planet to consciously evolve. And as we learn to evolve and pursue our particular path, truth by truth, the ninth insight says that overall culture will transform in a very predictable way. He paused, but no one said anything. Obviously, we wanted to hear more. Once we reach the critical mass, he continued, and the insights begin to become in on a global scale, the human race will first experience a period of intense introspection. We'll grasp how beautiful and spiritual the natural world really is. We'll see trees and rivers and mountains as temples of great power to be held in reverence and awe. We'll demand an end to any economic activity that threatens this treasure. And those closest to this situation will find alternative solutions to this pollution problem because someone will intuit these alternatives as they seek their own evolution. This will be part of the first great shift that will occur, he continued, which will be a dramatic movement of the individuals from one occupation to another. Because where people begin to receive clear intuitions of who they really are and what they're supposed to be doing, they will often discover they're in the wrong job and they'll have to jump to another type of work in order to continue to grow. The manuscript says that during this period, people will somehow change careers several times during their lifetime. The next cultural shift will be an automation of the production of goods to the people who are doing the automating, the techniques that will feel like a need to make economy run more efficiently. But as their intuitions become clearer, they will see what automation is actually doing, is freeing up everyone's time so that we can pursue other endeavors. The rest of us, meanwhile, will be following our own intuitions with our chosen occupations and wishing we had even more of this free time. We will realize that the truth we have to tell and the things we have to do are too unique to fit within a usual job setting. So we will find ways to cut our employment hours to pursue our own truths. Two of these people will hold what used to be one full-time job. This trend will make it easier for those displaced by the automation to find at least part-time jobs. Well, what about money? I asked. I can't believe people will voluntarily reduce their incomes. Oh, we won't have to, Dobson said. The manuscript says our incomes will remain stable because of the people who are giving us money for the insights we provide. I almost laughed. What? He smiled and looked directly at me. The manuscript says that as we discover more about the energy dynamics of the universe, we will see what really happens when we give someone something. Right now, the only spiritual idea about giving is the narrow concept of religious tithing. He moved his gaze to Father Sanchez. As you know, the scriptural notion of tithing is interpreted most commonly as an injunction to give 10% of one's income to a church. The idea behind this is that whatever we give will be returned many times. But the ninth insight explains that giving is really a universal principle of support, not just for churches, but for everyone. When we give, we receive in return because of the way energy interacts in the universe. Remember, when we project energy into someone, this creates a void in ourselves, which, if we connected, fills up again. Money works exactly the same way. The ninth insight says that once we begin to give constantly, we will always become more coming in that we will possibly give away. And our gifts, he went on, should go to the persons who have given us spiritual truth. When people come into our lives at just the right time to give us the answers we need, we should give them money. This is how we will begin to supplement our incomes and ease out of the occupations which limit us. As more people engage in the spiritual economy, we will begin to real shift into the culture of the next millennium. We will have moved through the stage of evolving into our right occupation and will be entering the stage of getting paid for evolving freely and offering our unique truth to others. I looked at Sanchez. He was listening intently and appeared radiant. Yes, he said to Dobson, I see that clearly. If everyone were participating, then we would be giving and receiving constantly, and this interaction with others, this exchange of information would become everyone's new work, our new economic orientation. We'd be paid by the people we touched. This situation would then allow the material supports of life to become fully automated because we would be too busy to own those systems or to operate them. We would want material production automated and run like a utility. We don't stock in it, perhaps, but the situation would free us up to expand what is already the information age. I think with that, we're going to have to close. And we'll come back on Saturday, I'm sure. And we'll be finishing up the last part of the book, which should be pretty exciting. Excuse me. So with that, I will go ahead and close for today. And I will expectantly see you on Saturday. And again, I hope everybody enjoys what I'm doing and hope to see you on Saturday. So everybody have a great and wonderful day. Thank you. Bye-bye.